Brad, we've officially gone too far.
I think that probably goes for a lot of different categories these days, but what do you have in mind?
Look, I had to get a USB thumb drive, which I haven't, like, I don't use it. I guess I use them to install Linux and stuff, but I haven't used one for a while.
Really? You don't keep like a stash ready of known good sticks?
The stash has waned as I went to fewer and fewer trade shows over the years. So
trade show USB sticks are not operating system grade in my experience, to be fair.
Well, so there's I have one that Valve gave me a few years ago. I have a Microsoft one that Windows 7 came on. That's been pretty good for a long time.
Occasionally you would get a really nice one that actually held up. Like I have one that is a tiny GTX 1080.
That's pretty good.
Like it's 64 gigabytes, which at the time in 2018, whenever that was, when did the 1080 come out?
2017, 2018, yeah.
At the time, a free 64 gig USB stick was quite a thing.
Well, and like I have a bunch of old ones that I killed using TrueNAS and FreeNAS, right?
Yes, that will happen.
I have a 128 gig 3.0 one that I used for a really long time, but also has all like the foo files on it, like the original source files, because it's how I moved them off of the recording machines. I had backups other places, but
I was going to say, I hope that's not the only copy of that source file code.
Doesn't matter. No, that's not the code. It's the recordings.
Oh, okay.
But like I don't have a bunch of in-betweens, and I don't have a bunch of USB 3 ones. I only have a couple of USB 3 ones. So I had to get a USB 3 thumb drive that was greater than 32 gigabytes.
Okay.
And I had to format it with a tool, and then I had to plug it into one specific USB port in my car. And start the car to update the nav system firmware in the car so it can switch to getting over-the-air updates now.
Okay, there's a lot here.
I realize. I told you we've gone too far.
I'm sure, like many people out there, there's nothing I love more than updating things.
I love a good firmware update.
Just the feeling of preparedness that comes from knowing all of your devices are up to date is better than using the devices, I find.
I'm going to tell you, one of the perks of being unemployed is that when I look around and I see something, I'm like, I haven't checked the firmware on that in a while. Yep. I have time to deal with it now.
Mm-hmm. All that said, the risk of bricking your sole means of transportation might be too much.
Well, so the car works without the nav system. Like, this isn't like a Tesla situation where when I got in the car and started the firmware update, it turned everything off and the doors wouldn't work anymore. This was more of a, hey, we're going to turn off the music and you can use the buttons for the air conditioning, but you can't turn on the seat chillers. And the rear view camera is not going to work. It's
almost like you bought a car from a company that has long experience making actual cars.
Yeah. But so like, and none of the stuff that they added in the update is like super important stuff, but it means now I'll get map updates over the air or overnight occasionally and stuff like that, which is nice. But I have to tell you. Okay. So first off, I put the thumb drive in. It was like, hey, do you want to update? And the dialogue was pretty good. I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, let's do this. And it said, hey, you can turn the car off, go away, whatever. It's going to be fine. It'll be a while. And I was like, well, I wonder what a while is. And then nothing happened for a really long time, which was unsettling, like 20 minutes. And then I realized that I sent you some pictures, I think.
Yes.
And then I realized that there was actually a progress bar that was underneath the words on the picture.
Oh, that's almost impossible to see, even in these photos.
In the bright light, it was impossible to see.
Even though the rest of this display is quite easy. Huh. That's a bit nerve-wracking.
So all told, it took about an hour to install the firmware update. It was like 40 gigs. It was bigger than 32 gigs.
I was going to ask, like,
what's map data?
Oh, sure.
For the entire continental US.
I was going to say, like, binary, like executable and firmware type stuff, usually pretty small, but that makes sense.
Yeah, so they're copying over a buttload of like, hey, every Starbucks that's changed locations in the continental US, maybe all of North America, I don't know. I got patch notes at the end.
I wonder what kind of storage is in your car, both capacity and also like medium.
It's probably
some kind of flash, some kind of like fairly resilient flash memory.
Yeah, there's a whole industry of automotive grade computer components. So I assume it's like a 256 gig automotive grade SSD that's designed to work up to like 160 degrees Fahrenheit or something.
Sure. You got patch notes?
I got patch notes for the car.
Okay.
Now when I drive through a tunnel, previously when I drove through a tunnel, if we drove through a tunnel, it would close the outdoor air return so it goes on internal only, so you don't get tunnel smell in the car.
Wow.
Which is nice.
Okay.
Now, if the windows are open when you approach a tunnel, it'll roll up the windows for you. I'm up and down on that one.
I'm not so sure. What if your arm is just hanging out the window?
There's a safety on modern cars so your arm doesn't get cut off.
All right.
That was a threat our parents told us when For people who don't know, in the old days, you had to have a hand crank to crank up the window of the car.
My car still has a hand crank.
It's hard to chop your arm off with that. When we got a car with motors,
I know.
I got the from my mom. Don't stick your arm out there when you're rolling it up. You'll cut your arm off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that ever actually happened to anybody.
Yeah, well, their generation also didn't want to wear seatbelts. So what do they know?
Very true. The best part of this, the number 4 bullet point on this was introducing Sounds of Nature 3, curated by Jung Jae-il, the acclaimed music director behind the hits Parasite and Squid Game.
Oh.
Experience new soundtracks for all 4 seasons, including Harbingers of Spring, A Summer Night's Rest, Autumn's Sentiments, and Warmth in Winter. While driving, enjoy the changing seasons with these evocative soundscapes.
What triggers those?
They're ambient. They're like chill vibes to drive to options in the media UI.
Like you just pull them up automatically? Because I mean, normally it's radio, either terrestrial or satellite, and then like your phone, right? Like those are the sources of music. Like just having them built into the car is a little odd.
Yeah, it's just data, man.
But, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's it. I'm gonna jam out to some Sounds of Nature 3, I guess, next time I get in the car.
You completed a progress bar and now you're ready to drive.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Bot. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello.
Hi, hello. Hi, hello.
Greetings. Like 6 p.m. on a Friday.
I know, this is a weird time to record. My voice is weird.
End of week podcast.
Having unseasonable allergies here, which is like, I don't know. I took a COVID test the other day because I thought I had the Rona again.
Man.
And my allergies have been so bad, and it's such a weird time for it.
Those are some intense allergies.
So apologies if my voice is weird. So this week we're doing something. It's not that we've done this before. There were 3 things that we thought were interesting. We didn't think we could get a full episode out of any of them, but we wanted to talk about them because they're either interesting from a pure Schadenfreude side. They're interesting because space is cool.
Trying to figure out, like, I feel like Schadenfreude could be involved in any of these, any and all of these 3, but
I think two more than the third.
Sure. Yes.
But anyway, we're going to talk about kind of 3 things that are happening right now. We've done a fair amount of reading and learning. The first one is the Boeing Starliner is stranded on the space station. Mm-hmm. So they're just stuck there.
Yep.
We'll talk about that.
Yep.
Next is one that we have titled "What's Up with AI?" And 2 things happened this week. Microsoft and Apple have left the OpenAI board. And last week there was this Goldman Sachs AI report that was not real good for the AI people.
Kind of scathing.
Yeah. And then the third one is that Windows 10, if you haven't heard, next October, you're not going to get any more security updates for Windows 10 ever again from Microsoft, probably. Maybe asterisk.
Yes. Yeah, I think like we've gotten some questions about this here and there, but also just like, what's the state of Windows and should I continue running Windows has been a frequent topic of conversation recently. So I thought we might address this one.
Well, and the Windows 10 EOS end of service is what EOS stands for, is more important than usual for Windows updates because the upgrade requirements to go from Windows 10 to Windows 11 are higher than ever before and have some like binary, either you have to have this or it's just not going to work kind of requirements. So anyway, you want to start with the Boeing?
Sure.
Boeing's had a great year.
I was going to say this is something different to talk about Boeing being in the news for. Somewhat slightly less deadly.
They haven't killed anybody with this one yet. Hopefully no deaths with this. We love both of the people involved in this.
Yes. Hopefully not.
But yeah, the Starliner has been stuck in the ISS for a few weeks now. This is the first crewed flight of the Boeing Starliner. It's a reusable craft designed to bring crew, not cargo, to LEO, low Earth orbit. Yeah,
I'd kind of had a lot going on recently. I had like kind of completely missed the story, but also just kind of didn't know anything about Starliner in general. I feel like SpaceX kind of just dominates all of the commercial space flight news these days. Like, it's hard to remember that, the big old aerospace companies like Boeing are even in that market. And there's also upstart competitors like Blue Origin that you kind of don't think about either. It's just kind of all SpaceX all the time, whether that's because they're running the most tests and flights right now or because of Elon Musk's shitty antics or both. I don't know.
I think it's just volume. Like they're launching so many SpaceX flights that like they've run out of customers for SpaceX flights at this point. Right. And like that is a business threat for them.
Yes. But yeah, this is just for crew. This is just for transporting human beings into orbit and back, not like, because I feel like reusable like cargo flights are the big hot thing.
Well, the Dragon, the crew, the cargo Dragon has been running for a really long time now. This is all part of the NASA post-shuttle initiative to not have to rely on Russians to get stuff to the space station.
Yes, there's a name for that. I'm gonna commercial crew program. That's I believe the NASA CCP.
Well, commercial crew is just for the personed flights, but commercial spaceflight initiatives are a larger thing.
That's right. This Boeing flight is part of the CCP.
Yeah, and I think the idea is that the space station and other servicing missions move into commercial domain so that NASA proper can focus on Moon and Mars and beyond. So anyway, they launched the first crewed flight, which was originally scheduled for 7 years ago. 2017, a big year of this episode, I think.
I pulled a little history on this thing. Yes, there have been two unmanned test flights of this thing previously. This is the first, uncrewed. Yeah. This is the first one that have had people on it, and it turned out to not go exactly according to plan. But yes, literally like 7 years ago, this crewed flight was originally scheduled to go. I'm sure the pandemic had something to do with that, but also it's just been a lot of delays.
Crewed spaceflight is hard, right? Like this is sending people to space is hard. They've been stranded up for the last few weeks on the space station. There's plenty of food. That's the first question I think everybody always asks about this. There's always multiple months of food left on the space station. They're always good to go.
Yes, I figured it's not. I mean, like I said, I have not really caught up on this or heard much about it, and I have to assume, it's not exactly like an Apollo 13 situation. Because it has not been like dire, headlines in the news every day.
Honestly, it's kind of interesting that we're at a place where we can test a new person-rated space flight system, and it's not like it wasn't news at all.
Right. Also, as far as them being stuck on the ISS, I'm trying to find right now. I don't know if I can find like an up to the minute count, but I assume there are a decent number of other people on the ISS as we speak.
Yeah. The crew. So the limit on the ISS is always how much evacuation space you have. Like there's more space for people to live than there is evacuation space generally.
Okay.
So usually I think there's usually a Soyuz and there's usually a Crew Dragon or two attached to the space station right now.
I was going to say in a very cramped, limited and living environment like that, evacuation could have multiple meanings. Well, you're talking about the emergency get off the station.
Yes.
Type.
There's a Russian bathroom. I think there's at least one a US bathroom. I think there might be two US bathrooms now. I can't remember, but it's so. Having walked around the floor model, like in Houston, they have this big giant like scale model that you can walk around inside of the space station. It's not like there's not like doors and stuff. It has pictures of the inside of the capsules on the walls. So you see where everything is, you see where like the sleeping cabinets and all that stuff are. But you can't obviously, like there's not microscopes and telescopes and stuff hanging out of the side of this thing.
But you get a sense of how big or small it is.
It's freaking like, okay. When you're walking around in a big giant hangar in Houston, you can kind of step from one module to the next outside. It feels enormous. When it's the place that you're going to live for the next 6 months, it probably feels a little bit smaller. Mm-hmm. My guess is that they test people for claustrophobia, like that specific kind of claustrophobia before you get stationed on the space station for 6 months.
Sure.
But it's like it's roomy. It's not like you're in a 1-bedroom 600 square foot apartment. It's big.
And is any one given room pretty spacious? I mean, I know you can say like, the whole thing, there's like quite a bit of square footage or whatever the metric is there. But I mean, like any one room you're in, like, is it like very low ceilings or does it feel spacious just in your immediate surroundings?
Well, you're floating, right?
Well, so I know that but still just like, like, can you extend your arms to both sides and like touch the walls, or is it kind of more cavernous than that?
I think it's that would be at the edge. I think you kind of, when you're in zero microgravity, you kind of want that, right?
Yeah, you probably want a lot of surfaces to push off of.
Well, because you can get stuck.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the middle with no momentum,
right,
you're going to need somebody to come grab you and push you in. They actually did. There's a video on YouTube of them positioning somebody in a place where they can't grab anything and they can't swim because that's BS. It doesn't. The air is thin on the space station, and B, like you don't get enough resistance to do that anyway. So you could literally get stuck in the middle of the open void. That's why you don't want a big giant open room in microgravity.
Sure. How do they do? I mean, I don't. I could just sit here asking questions all episode long. How do they do like oxygen CO2 exchange? Like, do they straight up use plants, or like what's the?
So they have there's multiple systems in play. The main thing is that they do a real low oxygen. It's real low pressure, high oxygen environment, so they don't have to pressurize it to full atmosphere. It's like 4/10 of an atmosphere or something. I think I don't remember the exact numbers. Right now, listeners are yelling at their radios. Because I didn't expect to talk about this, but yeah, it's high ox, low, and then they filter out so they have both chemical filters. They don't have plants, or there are plants, but they're not using plants directly for oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange.
Yeah, I think that would scale very well. But.
Yeah, I think that my recollection is that the main thing that they use is some lithium reaction that they can reverse by heating up the filter, the medium, and releasing the carbon dioxide and reuse the filters. And I think they vent the carbon dioxide or store it or something. I don't know what they do with it. But anyway, the upshot is with the Starliner that there were both thruster issues, and then there were also some helium leaks. The helium they used to pressurize some fuel systems. The thruster issues were more immediate concern because when they were coming in to dock with the space station, they lost 5 of the reaction control system thrusters. These are the little ones that make the little puffs.
Yeah, the little maneuvering.
Yeah, like if you played Kerbal, you know that these are the ones you use to aim your stuff around when you're in microgravity. They overheated and lost thrust and had to be turned off. 4 of them later recovered, but not at full power. I think I wrote seems like and then I didn't finish that thought, so I don't remember what I was going to write there. But the part of the issue is that these thrusters are on the service module, which is jettisoned and burns up in the atmosphere on return. So in order for them to continue troubleshooting and testing and seeing, like, once they deorbit the spacecraft and the astronauts come back to Earth, they can't get any more data, which is the thing it seems like they're more concerned about. They don't, the vibe that NASA and Boeing are giving out here is very much, hey, everything's cool. The astronauts are fine. No danger to the craft. But if we deorbit this, then we lose our ability to find out more stuff about why this happened.
Yeah, that was the key detail in reading this that made me go, oh, okay, this is why the reporting has not been especially breathless about this. It's not like they're stuck. It's that they just are taking their time.
Yeah,
to try to diagnose this problem while they still can.
The other thing, and it's unclear to me how many seats are available. There's a Crew Dragon on the station right now. There's another one scheduled for mid-August. So presumably that holds 4 people. Presumably if they need to return people earlier, or they need to, like, this isn't going to be safe for humans to return with, they'll send up the August Crew Dragon with 2 fewer people on it. Right. And then there'll be 2 more seats that are safe for return.
Yeah. You don't want to burn any of your known good return craft if you don't have to.
Yeah.
And then be stuck with just a problematic test flight only craft that of indeterminate issues. You can help it.
Yeah, so there's 12 people on the station right now.
Oh, that's more than I thought.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I think I'd seen it usually averages like 7.
Well, there's 3 on the Chinese station, Tiangong.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's why the
and
capacity
there's
has
9
increased.
on ISS right now.
Got it.
But so we have 3 people on a Soyuz, 4 people came up on SpaceX Crew 8, and the 2 people on the Starliner. So anyway, they're doing thruster testing, and they've burned them a couple times. Seems like the issues have been somewhat resolved, but who knows what the problems are. It seems like it has to do with overheating in the design on the craft. Maybe, horrifyingly enough, they need a firmware update for the software because the thrusters were firing with higher frequency.
Well, somebody's just going to have to ferry up a larger than 32 gigabyte USB stick.
Exactly. But yeah, so Steve Stitch, rather, who's the NASA commercial crew program manager, has said multiple times. The last quote from him seemed to had real like, "Hey, I'm tired of talking about this because it's just the same thing. We have to figure out what the issues are all the way through before we deorbit the service module." And they're hoping to wrap up the investigation, which includes more ground simulation of the similar thrusters next week, which would be the week of the 15th, I think, July 15th. Starliner lands on land. I didn't know this.
Yeah, I didn't realize any of these things did that. I mean, obviously, like the space shuttle landed on a runway, right?
Well,
like,
the Soyuz
like an
lands on land.
Oh, does it?
Yeah,
okay.
It has retro rockets that fire at the last second that give you by all reports, a really, really hard impact, like a small car crash.
That's exactly it. I just assumed a water landing was just so much easier in terms of the impact manage that. Why would anybody bother with a land landing? But
I think when you want to do something reusable, it's a little harder, right?
Yeah, I guess not everybody has an aircraft carrier.
Yeah,
to go retrieve thing. Everybody does not have the unlimited resources of the United States government and military at their disposal.
Exactly. Anyway, Starliner, the ticking clock right now is that the Starliner batteries are rated for 45 days, which ends on the 20th of July. It seems like they're likely to stay beyond that time at this point. And they do have to get the ship clear in order to launch that Crew Dragon mission. Because it's on the same port that the Starliner is on right now.
I wonder what the dead batteries mean for its ability to disembark. I assume not much, or they would be sweating that deadline a lot more.
So the batteries, it's about when they're rated for, not necessarily when they're still good. Like this is, we over-engineer things situation generally. They had this when they were doing the SLS launch a couple months ago, there was a battery issue because the booster had stayed on the pad for so long that they thought they were going to have to come and disassemble the entire thing potentially if they missed a final window or something. So, it seems like the feeling I got from that, and I don't know if this is correct or not. People are yelling at the radio, is that it's more of a, hey, we wouldn't launch if this was beyond the window than a, we won't deorbit the thing. Like they'll be able to look at the numbers and see.
Sure. I wonder if they're able to power some systems down to extend that duration.
I think it's about chemistry in the batteries is the feeling I always got, but I don't know for sure. So anyway, yeah, the everything seems fine is the TLDR for right now. If they are worried that it's not going to be safe for people, then they have the Crew Dragon. And this is almost certainly going to delay the first real mission for the Starliner, which was currently scheduled for early next year. And seems like bad news for Boeing.
Yeah, that'll be like 2030.
Yeah.
Man, fucking Boeing. Holy shit. What a
fucking Boeing. Holy shit.
That should be the title of this episode.
That's the title of their annual report this year.
Like, man, didn't I say the Justice Department just like ruled them open to criminal prosecution or something like that?
For the 737 MAX stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It is bad news. I explicitly avoided booking a ticket on a MAX recently.
I mean, I don't think that's a bad choice necessarily.
Like they claim to have corrected the software problems that led to those crashes a few years ago.
Yeah.
But those are also the planes that they keep running stories about, like, oh, the rivet's missing on this one. And like
the bolt holding the plug where the escape hatch usually is. We're off. Yeah.
And that's what the whistleblowers are coming out saying, like, hey, like parts that did not pass safety inspections were still in the production line when I was there type stuff.
Almost like unrestrained capitalism is a mistake.
The thing that really pushed me over the edge is one of the like production managers on that project. He was literally like a lead on the MAX project and also like a 30-year Navy veteran before that. So probably like pretty serious about vehicular safety. Left Boeing over concerns about the safety issues he was seeing on the production line, and the management kind of freezing him out when he was trying to raise these issues with them. Like he now runs like an advocacy group advocating against this airliner, and he refuses to fly on them himself. And I'm like, all right, if one of the people who built this airplane refuses to fly on that airplane, I don't feel quite that paranoid about it myself.
Yep. Anyway, yeah. Boeing.
I jotted a question at the end of this, just a general space travel, space flight question that I wanted an answer to. What happens to the rocket or booster stages that are jettisoned into the ocean? It came to mind because I was reading about the land landing of this capsule, but there are parts of this that end up in the ocean, like most other launches. And do they all just sink to the bottom and that's it? Like there is zero.
Generally speaking, yeah. There's been some exceptions. The space shuttle solid rocket boosters got fished out.
Okay, I think that must be what I was thinking of. Was remembering hearing in the 80s and 90s about them retrieving those and reusing them.
Well, and then also SpaceX, of course, lands the boosters a fair amount of the time if the mission profile allows for it, right?
Yeah. I specifically meant the stuff that lands in the ocean, just the like parts of the rocket boosters that are just, you see all the classic old footage of Apollo with the stage detaching and falling back to Earth.
Yep. And then it just burns up or falls to pieces or splashes down in the ocean.
Right.
Hopefully you're not in a boat under there. Hey, Brad, what's up with AI?
I don't know, man. Sometimes I wring my hands about how much we should continue talking about AI. I worry people are going to get tired of hearing about it. But when it's a story like this,
yeah, I worry less.
I think there's some meat to sink our teeth into here.
Yeah,
because it feels like the worm is turning a bit.
I mean, I said this on the PC World podcast a few weeks ago, but it feels to me like we've reached the peak of inflated expectations on the Gartner hype cycle, and we're heading toward the trough of despair real fast.
Mm-hmm.
It was around the time Google launched their AI assisted search and then immediately pulled support for it like 3 days later because it sucked so bad.
Yeah. Also, can I just interject here?
Yes.
I looked up the phrase "the worm turns."
Yes.
I never realized that does denote a sudden change in the situation, but specifically one where you go from like a position of weakness to a position of strength.
I've never heard that term before. Is
Really?
it a worm gear? Is that what it's talking about?
I have no idea what the origin is. Like you never heard like the worm has turned.
Oh.
To imply that some profound change has happened in a situation.
Okay.
After I said it, I second guessed myself. See, I could have cut that out when I got it wrong, but instead I was like, why don't I
just dig in?
Why don't I communicate this information to other people who might not know? Used to talk about how a situation can suddenly change so that a person who has been weak, unlucky, unsuccessful, etc., can become strong, lucky, and successful.
Have you?
I didn't realize it was specifically a bad to good.
I wonder
transition.
if this is a regional thing. Because
maybe.
Have you done that the New York Times, like, hey, where do you live? Local lingo study thing that they released in 2013?
Yes, I think I did. And I think it was pretty accurate.
We did that. So I did it back in the day when it came out and it was going around. And then we did it a couple weeks ago with my daughter, who's lived her entire life in California, but has parents from Northeast Tennessee.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, it was fascinating because it like locked her in to Santa Clara, basically.
Really?
Yeah.
Like no southeastern influence whatsoever.
There were darker patches around, but Santa Clara pretty much. So anyway,
all right.
I wonder if worm turns is some North Carolina business is what I'm saying.
I don't know.
So okay, two stories on the AI front. Both seem bad for AI. I don't know. The first one is a short one. It's easy to explain. Microsoft and Apple are both leaving the OpenAI board. Financial Times reported this earlier this week, and the gist is that there's new attention from the U.S. government about big companies using board seats to skirt anti-competitive laws, anti-collusion laws.
Okay, yeah, that's much different than I initially expected when I saw this, which kind of seemed like an expression of a lack of faith in the technology for them to be pulling out of this stuff, particularly Microsoft having put like $10 billion into
a lot of money, yeah.
But this is in fact them just trying to do what corporations do.
So it's specifically the Justice Department is doing an investigation on existing tech companies influencing the new AI companies, which maybe not is wasn't exactly what I was hoping for, but yeah. So they're going to back out. The OpenAI folks said there's going to be ongoing meetings for customers, including people such as Apple and Microsoft, to participate, but not in a board level. So
got it.
And Microsoft said some stuff that didn't imply anything, and Apple, I think, didn't have a comment. So
sure,
that's kind of their thing.
I wonder. I shouldn't even bring it up. I wonder how that antitrust attention might change if there is a change in administration.
Pretty easy to guess, Brad.
Well, yes and no. I mean, normally the like let corporations do whatever they want vibe would be very strong there, but there's also and again, I hesitate to get into this bullshit. There's Trump's animus toward social media and tech companies in particular.
That's true.
As regards his ability to say whatever the fuck he wants on their platforms. Anyway, let's move on.
The TLDR on the FTC probe is that probably it's not going to change because Microsoft and OpenAI still have a pretty tight partnership, which is, I think, the original concern. So the second part of this is the Goldman Sachs report. Goldman Sachs is an investment banking firm. They tell you where to spend your money if you're really rich and want to make a lot of money into even more money.
Yes, this seems like a way bigger deal, or maybe a bigger canary in the coal mine, potentially.
Yeah, so they send a monthly it's called Top of Mind is the name of the publication. It's a monthly report that goes out, and they're painting a less rosy picture of generative AI than anyone I've seen writing about it in the business world, really.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, generative AI is stuff like large language models, the image generation, all of the kind of questionable copyright uses. Fun fact, didn't mention concerns about copyright at all in this report.
You don't say.
Yeah, which is kind of shocking, actually.
Well, it is and it is. I mean, not to stereotype, these types of people I tend to assume care about one thing only, and it's what's going to make them money.
Well,
and if copyright concerns don't affect that, then why would they talk about it?
I was going to say, I think that's the interesting thing, is that because the lens through which you should look at this is where should you invest your money to make the most money off of AI and AI related hype, not talking about copyright, says they have good reason to feel like copyright isn't an issue for this, at least in the short term.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Anyway,
do we class ChatGPT as generative? It's kind of in an in between a little bit.
No, it's generative because it's generating language. It's a large language model.
I mean, what it's generating is a little harder to categorize than an image or a video.
But it's generating text. Like, you can say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a 3,000 word document about Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, and it'll do that. Well,
that's what I mean. Like text is the medium of the output, but like the nature of what it's outputting is much broader than one single piece of media. But you're right. Yes, that does seem as generative as anything else.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's the mainline generative case for most people, I think.
Yeah.
So they identified multiple kind of top line risks. One is that it's just not very good. It can solve basic problems, but not reliably, and it can't solve complicated problems.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really serve any market need. It uses a bunch of power and like electrical power and computer hardware that doesn't really exist, and that supply is going to be supply constrained for the foreseeable future. Their estimate tops the total cost for infrastructure that needs to support AI growth through 2030 at around $1 trillion.
A lot of money.
That includes like power plants, power transmission, NVIDIA chips, presumably, and data center growth. And they talk about power generation a lot, actually, and this is where there's been a raft of power use stories that have come out over the last week.
Yeah, that's been getting a lot of discussion.
I think this kicked off a lot of them. The TLDR there is that power generation in the U.S. has been pretty stagnant for the last 20 years. We've seen some green energy replacing old power plants that are going offline, or inefficient power plants that are going offline. They're expecting that the data center power usage to more than double in the next 6 years. Virginia's seeing big spikes already, expecting the data center draw to go from 0% in 2016 of the total use of electricity in Virginia to 15% last year, 2023.
Is that just one random handpicked stat, or like does Virginia have an unusually high concentration of data centers, or does every state have them and this is just the figure you have here?
So Northern Virginia has a high concentration because the climate is right, the water supply is good, and power is relatively cheap. Like when you're building data centers, there's those are the three things you look for: is cheap power, a lot of water, and for cooling, and cheap real estate. So we don't have a lot in the Bay Area, even though the temperature's kind of climate and we have a lot of water around. I guess our water is also salt water, which is bad. So anyway, people build data centers a lot in Phoenix because space is cheap and power is cheap, but not a lot of water, and also it's really hot there. I don't get that exactly, but maybe the difference between 70 and 100 degrees outside is insignificant when you're talking about the amount of energy generated by these heat generated by these data centers. They also pointed out that ChatGPT queries are roughly 10 times more power intensive than a Google lookup at the best case. So that means typing something into Google and asking it and asking ChatGPT for something simple is at least 10x more power. I've seen that number. I've seen that a wide range of estimates for that. This one was backed up by some data. So I don't know.
Sure. That's both a lot. That's both a huge difference, but also maybe not as big a difference as I would have expected.
My guess is it's not factoring in the training side. It's only factoring in the actual query side,
like time of use.
Yeah, the query side goes down the more people use it, right? Because you're amortizing that cost over more users. Yeah. But still not great.
Yeah, and you're seeing. I mean, this is very anecdotal, but you're starting to see people talking about, like, especially younger users. Like ChatGPT has basically just effectively replaced Google or replaced the traditional search engine as their search engine.
Yeah, I think part of that is the testament to, hey, ChatGPT is really good at being truthy, and B, that Google is really good at sucking ass over the last 5 years.
Sure.
The kind of the big executive overview of this thing is that it said, hey, we're looking at spending $1 trillion on infrastructure to support data center and compute capacity, and there's no business to support that spend. And they contrasted that specifically with the rise of the internet in the 90s, which provided a low-cost technology solution that allowed online commerce to replace brick and mortar. So it was cheaper and better, online commerce versus brick and mortar, cheaper and better. Whereas this is more expensive and worse than the markets it's presuming to replace.
Yeah. There was a great line, a very succinct line going around on Twitter. I don't know if this was from this report or somebody was paraphrasing. It might have been like Ed Zitron or somebody.
Ed has been leading the charge on AI is stupid for a really long time.
Yes, for sure. But and I'm paraphrasing what may have been a paraphrasing in the first place, but it was essentially, this is $1 trillion technology without a $1 trillion problem that needs to be solved.
That was from this report.
Yeah. Which was just, I thought, a pretty elegant way to sum up the problem.
So in addition to the, hey, we didn't talk about copyright at all in this thing, and I'm gonna, copyright is a phrase not found in the 25 or 30 page report, whatever it is. They're treating NVIDIA like the only semiconductor company capable of building AI training chips, which I thought was interesting because both AMD and Intel have solutions in the market.
Yeah.
My understanding from Computex related stuff a few weeks ago is that NVIDIA's main advantage is the same thing that they did with CUDA on the GPU compute side, which is that they have a hardware software package that effectively locks developers onto their platform. Because you can't run, if you build your software for NVIDIA data centers, you can't run it on an AMD or Intel data center because you don't have the software side of that.
Right.
It's kind of comparable to like building a big web app, a complicated web app that uses the entire AWS or Google Cloud stack, in that it's locked on that forever because it costs so much to change over to the other platforms. You're probably not going to bother.
This is just the graphics API wars all over again.
Kind of is. Except for now, instead of it being $100 million business, it's $1 trillion, huge infrastructure.
Yeah. I assume this maybe also has something to do with just the short-term thinking that most investment types, I assume, engage in, very quarterly to annual. Like NVIDIA is the thing making money now. It's like these other companies may get there later, but this is the only company that matters in the sense that you will make money on them.
I think that's true. It's also possible that there's something fundamental that we don't understand about this market because it's not a place we usually do a lot of work.
Yeah.
I think that, however, judging by the comments, like this has the normal range in analyst reports. Some of them seemed very smart and some of them seemed like real dopes. So just judging by the things that I am comfortable making a judgment on, there's a ton of hardware startups in this space. There's a ton of different people. And of course, Intel and AMD are both enormous companies that are trying to crack in here as well. I think that the software, I think underestimating the impact of, hey, we've built all of our software for NVIDIA, we got to keep buying NVIDIA, remains probably pretty important unless NVIDIA just can't deliver chips.
Right. Yeah, and I wonder if they've just got too big of a head start at this point. Like, I don't know what the efforts are in like kind of open common APIs for this sort of thing. Like is
there are efforts for sure.
Yeah, like DirectML is a thing for Microsoft, right? But that would be limited to Windows.
Yeah, I think that it's like the stuff that stable diffusion and the more open sides are working on.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any kind of like machine learning equivalent of Vulkan out there, like just an open working group putting something open source and platform agnostic together.
I mean, I think the larger issue is that you're building your applications to do the training, and those are the place where the investment is. And once you do the being able to do the training is the hard part, right? Yeah. Anyway, the other thing that I thought was interesting out of this is that and this is something that we've said before as well, they don't feel like the cost of compute is going to decrease. Like they describe everyone as being optimistic. And the assumption that cost of compute goes down is based on the idea of Moore's law, increasing performance decreasing cost per transistor, basically, for a really long time, and the fact that AMD and Nvidia and Intel and all these other companies were competing with each other. It's also based a lot on the idea that in the early web days, starting a website meant you had to have a Sun Microsystems server someplace running their web server, right? Because that's what the web server software ran on. And then all of a sudden Linux came along, and the LAMP stack meant you could put on a $2,000 computer instead of a $65,000 Sun server. The cost of making websites went down dramatically in the early 2000s. I thought that was fascinating, because I hadn't actually thought about it in that context before. And it's actually very true. People generally overestimate what the technology, this is another thing they said, people generally substantially overestimate what the technology is capable of today. This is a direct quote. In our experience, even basic summarization tasks often yield illegible and nonsensical results. That is my experience exactly.
Yeah, there's something very validating about reading this in such blunt language, and from money people,
Yeah, these are the people...
For people who have no interest in tearing the technology down on ideological or emotional grounds. Like they just can't, if this thing was going to make you $1 bajillion, they would be happy to shepherd you in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they thought it was capable of doing that. So hearing them make this pretty blunt assessment feels pretty good.
Let's see. The next one is that there's no roadmap for the future of this tech, which they directly compared to the run up to the smartphone in the early 2000s. And the analyst who wrote this one specifically said, look, I was there in the early 2000s. Everybody acts like now, like the iPhone came out of nowhere in 2007, but it is absolutely untrue. There were people talking about payments. There were people talking about cameras. There were people talking about data and always connected devices and connecting to the internet primarily through your phone.
Yeah, touch screens.
Yeah, Palm and Microsoft and a bunch of people who were in that space before the iPhone were absolutely doing that. And there's none of that here. Like, we're 18 months into this and no one has examples or a single cost-effective use for this technology since the launch of ChatGPT 3.5. So yeah, like it is literally a $1 trillion investment with no plan for return.
Yeah. Yeah. I jotted down here in response to this. I mean, this is not my response. This is the AI people's, but if you were to say there's no roadmap for this tech, AGI is what they all say is the end goal. Artificial general intelligence, but that's so like vaguely defined in terms of like who could accomplish that, if at all, and what it would do, if anything. That I don't know that that's even worth discussing at this point.
So they talked about AGI in this. And the AGI is the idea that you'll get human scale intelligence, basically, right?
Yeah, like what is the common definition? Like kind of AI that is capable of doing anything a human can, but what does that even mean? Because like intellectually, I assume like we're not talking about like physical manipulation of objects unless you put the AI in a robot body, I suppose. But you get what I mean.
I can't find the exact quote, but some summation of this idea, because the idea is that in order to teach a person, you have to first get them to you have to first teach them how to read. You have to teach them how to draw, and you have to we're teaching these machines at kindergarten level. But their take on that was that there's nothing to show. There's nothing to say that if we continue to invest in that, we'll actually reach that point. There's literally nothing we're seeing so far. In fact, actually, the more we spend time on it, there's been regressions on some of the later models for like ChatGPT 4 versus 3.5 because they're getting worse instead of better.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we just have a maybe ChatGPT is just a slow second grader, is what I'm thinking. And then the last one is that they think that like the economists who were looking at what this is going to do to workforce and jobs and like the overall, this is one of my favorite stupid ideas, but the overall output of the United States, the workforce, everyone, what everyone does.
Just the economic output?
Like how much more money we as a people in this country make because of the advent of AI. And they were like, it's maybe 0.9%, 0.9% increase because they're and like not going to have blowout leads in any single categories or anything because they think it's going to lead to efficiency improvements. So meaning one person can do more work, which means it'll be like everyone will have access to the same technology and we'll all see the same efficiency improvements. So it's not like the people who get AI will be really, really good, super fast and better and smarter and faster. It's that they'll all be getting the same illegible and nonsensical results from their AI models. So it'll impact everyone the same. So
definitely sounds like it's worth $1 trillion.
Don't spend $1 trillion on this. Like here's the question I have for my legislators is, hey, who's going to pay for these power plants? Right? Are you and I, as customers of the power grid, going to pay for these power plants? That
was going to be my first answer.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way it's going to go unless we start complaining to our congressional representatives right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I think that is a real absolute concern that I'm paying $500 a month for electricity right now to subsidize OpenAI's bad language models.
Socialize risk and privatize profit is the American way.
Oh, that's grim.
I will give you a little follow up though before we wrap up here. I've pinpointed the origin of the phrase "the worm turns," or in its original form, "even a worm will turn."
Okay,
it's from a 1546 collection of proverbs by John Haywood.
So it's about a worm, like an actual worm.
Although this is in Middle English, which I am not going to. I had to do some Middle English in school, but I'm not going to attempt to read this.
So it's about like earthworms, basically.
This is Wikipedia's description. Conveys the message that even the meekest or most docile of creatures will retaliate or seek revenge if pushed too far.
Oh, well, so that we should be nice to the machines is what you're telling me.
Yes. The phrase had also appeared in Shakespeare, for what it's worth.
Well, I apologize for my second grader comment. OpenAI. It's the end, Brad.
Finally.
The end of Windows 10.
Oh, I don't know. That was a pretty good Windows. Maybe that's actually not something to celebrate. You finally made the turn, right? Yeah, no. I've been on 11 since I moved to this Intel machine. I don't have much to complain about, I suppose.
You can make Windows 11, as somebody who's been working on some videos for PC World about how to make Windows 11 not suck. It's not hard. You can run a couple of registry keys and like all of a sudden most of the problems are gone.
Yeah, I mean, that said, I still have not gotten around to tweaking the right click menu. I've still got the stupid 2-stage right click menu at the moment.
I find myself not minding this 2-stage right click menu because I only dip into the show more options about twice a week. Anyway, Windows 10, long may it live in our hearts, will stop getting security updates in October of 2025 from Microsoft.
Yeah, which I think has been known about for a while, but we're actually getting there now. Like, I think when that was announced, I looked at that and I was like, that's like 3.5 years away. Like, whatever. I'll be fine. It might as well be an eternity, but now we are actually coming up on it. It's
specifically October 14th, 2025.
Judgment Day.
Yeah, exactly. Dun, 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 dun. They're most at that point, most users will stop getting Windows security updates. There will be no new feature updates. Microsoft will offer paid security updates, which is traditionally to corporations for machines that are like hooked up to some giant piece of, industrial equipment or whatever. And you don't want to you can't change. Like if you have something attached to $1 million MRI machine, you just unplug it from the internet and you leave it running.
The irony is, based on what I mostly read about embedded systems like that are hooked up to industrial equipment, they're going to need to keep updating Windows 10 for another like 30 years, because most of what I hear is like it's a 486. It's like something from the 90s that is still running this thing. Or that's why there's that cottage industry of 486 compatible SoCs out there now. Because people still have like industrial control software that needs to run on a machine like that.
More likely, we have a friend of the show who works in like a data chip fab type situation, who has sent occasionally pictures of just bathrooms that are full of old machines that they farm parts out of when one of those machines dies.
Mm-hmm.
So like as all the old Pentium 5 and Pentium 3s and Pentium 2s conked out, they would just pull them out and save them and then farm parts from them when they needed to fix those old machines and just leave them unplugged from the internet.
Yep.
The Microsoft is offering paid security updates for a couple more years to corporations. Those costs go up over time. They're not really going to be available to normal users as far as we can tell at this point. So at that point, Windows 10 will be effectively unpatched. Microsoft typically offers paid security updates after that point, typically to corporations. In this case, they might make them available to customers because of this next thing, which is, yeah, you could just update to Windows 11, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's free.
Yeah.
You have Windows 10, Windows 11 costs nothing.
Right. You're the product now.
Yeah. Welcome. Congratulations. You've transcended. Except now the hardware requirements for Windows 10 aren't really a subset. The hardware requirements for Windows 11 aren't entirely a superset of Windows 10's requirements. What I mean is you have the basic stuff. You need a 1 gigahertz processor with 2 cores, 4 gigabytes of RAM, 64 gigabytes plus of storage.
It's funny seeing those spelled out. I haven't thought to look up the literal system requirements of Windows in a very long time. Those are actually way lower than I would have expected at this point.
I'll tell you a secret. They haven't really changed much except for the addition of that second core since like Windows XP and like the end of the Windows XP timeframe.
No kidding.
Yeah. The memory requirements have gone from 2 gigabytes to 4 gigabytes, and the 1 gigahertz processor has been there forever.
Yeah. They've been on the same kernel with modifications, of course, but it's kind of the same technology they've been on for 25 years now, basically, since they moved to
the since they went to NT Windows 2000. Yeah. So the thing that's worse than normal is that they now require that you boot from UEFI, not old school BIOS, and it has to be secure boot capable. That's actually not that much of a problem. Most systems will do that have been made in the last 10 or 12 years. You may have to turn that on in the BIOS, which like Windows does a bad job of telling you. The issue is that it requires TPM 2.0. And there's a lot of really iffy information about this on the internet because the early versions of Windows 11 in beta would work with earlier versions of TPM 1.2, which is available much, much longer ago, all the way back to like Sandy Bridge, which is a 2013 or 2014 part.
The trusted platform module, did we mention?
Trusted platform module. What a TPM is, the trusted platform module is a secure crypto processor. It includes hardware acceleration for certain types of algorithms like AES. It has a hardware random number generator. It has storage for keys and software to generate them. And it has a way to determine if the hardware in the PC has materially changed using a hash. Secure boot is part of UEFI spec that secures the boot process. It limits other bootloaders. You have to have a signed bootloader in order to boot with it. And you can install UEFI drivers that aren't digitally signed either, which means it has booting implications.
Yeah, I know secure boot has been the bane of the Linux world for a while, although I think they've mostly gotten around that at this point.
Yeah, at this point, there's a couple of different ways around that in the Linux world. It still, BSD doesn't have a secure boot solution. You have to turn it off to boot a BSD machine.
Huh, I did not know that.
So the upshot for this is that you can install Windows 11 on a machine that's built more than like 7-ish years ago.
Yeah, it was like pretty short span of time, all things considered, because computers kind of last a long time now.
It wouldn't be that big a deal if Microsoft didn't have 1 billion computers running Windows 10 at this point.
Yeah.
It limits you to Intel's 8th gen and newer machines. So that's
Coffee Lake.
Yeah, that's it. So KB Lake and older don't work anymore.
Which is kind of crazy because KB Lake is what I was coming from when I built this. Well, both of the new machines last year, but like, for my purposes, that machine was pretty long in the tooth. Like I was probably on that machine a generation or two longer than I should have been, but it would still work just fine for a lot of people to be using a machine of that. That era.
Yeah, these are firmly computers I use it to run Chrome and check email and stuff kind of use cases at this point.
Yeah, like for reference, 7th gen I think came out in 2017 or maybe 16 at latest, but it's like not that long ago.
7th gen processors came out in 2017. I looked it up on the ARC site.
Yes, that's right. So it's like really, I mean, granted, we had a whole ass pandemic in there and everything, but still, that's not the oldest computer in the world. Like, it does feel a bit premature.
Yeah, the first Coffee Lake machines shipped in 2018. On the AMD side, it's basically Ryzen 1 and newer. Everything older is out.
Okay, that's
same time frame.
Yeah,
it's 2017, 2018 right. Is the cut.
Right. Which, I mean, I guess that just makes sense. That's when TPM technology became widespread.
Well, that's when TPM 2 came out. I think part of the deal is that TPM 1 and 1.2 often were optional, unlike enthusiast motherboards.
Yeah.
So like older motherboards, like I have a Sandy Bridge board. I think you have one that's similar that had a TPM header, which basically looks like one of those old school USB 2 headers. And you plugged a board specific module into that if you wanted TPM 1.2 on your desktop PC.
Yeah. But 1.2, as we've said, is not good enough for 11.
So there's conflicting reports. It seems like you can install it, but maybe not activate it if you have TPM 1.2. It is not supported according to the official specs for Windows 11.
So that's the word that had been going around when 11 first got big, was like, oh, there are ways to install it on machines lacking TPMs entirely. But like you said, you can't activate it, which means you can't pull updates from Windows Update, which like don't run a Windows that you can't update.
I for what it's worth, I don't think you can't pull optional updates if you have an unactivated Windows now. You still get security updates, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I guess it's in their best interest to not have a bunch of unpatched Windows machines around.
Yeah, they've fixed a lot of the goofy rules around that stuff that used to be a problem. Anyway, so effectively what they're saying is anything that was built before 2018 is probably not going to be supported anymore, which is a lot of computers.
Yeah.
People are fairly upset now.
Yeah. I mean, that's right in that window that I think of where computers got good. Like, I mean, they were good before that. I'm generalizing, but what I mean is like they reached a level of compute that had surpassed the needs of the common operating system and a lot of people's like day-to-day computing needs, just to such a degree that those computers are just kind of going to last for a while.
Like my MacBook from 2013 is running a Chrome OS fork, and it's perfectly usable. Right. It's a time when you had enough memory and enough storage and SSDs were prevalent and like all of the pieces were aligned. And like you said, computers got kind of good.
Yeah.
There's a couple of problems here. We're going to e-waste a whole bunch of computers on October 25th, 2025 or October 14th, 2025 right now. Part of the problem is that a lot of machines shipped with this stuff turned off, especially consumer machines. So when you run hey, can my computer run Windows 11, even if you have a machine that you bought in like 2019, 2020, 2021, in some cases, the TPM module and the secure boot will be turned off in the UFI.
Yeah, and that seems like a perfect storm because I'm guessing a lot of the people who wouldn't try to update Windows 11 until it was saying like, hey, Windows 10 is not getting updates anymore. You should really update. And like those are probably also the type of people that wouldn't know to look in the BIOS to turn something on when their computer says, no, you can't run 11.
Or in some cases, update the BIOS and then check the BIOS, right? It's like a two-step process.
Yeah.
And the checker doesn't say, hey, your machine should support this. You have to turn some stuff on. It does for some machines. It doesn't for a lot of them, basically. You can theoretically buy a TPM2 module for some specific machines, but they're board specific. And so you can't just go to Amazon and buy a generic USB TPM2 module. It needs to hook in at a lower level than that.
Yeah.
It's a real kind of, okay. So not all doom and gloom. We have a year. Microsoft has pushed back the date for this end of life date for OSs before they did it for XP. It's entirely possible you're going to do it again here.
I think they did it for 7 as well. I want to say.
I feel like that's the case because 8.2 or whatever was, people did not like it. I think there's a possibility that they'll have some sort of larger security update process that's more consumer accessible than the traditional one. I think they've already said that they're going to make the consumer one accessible this go around because of this change. They may also change the requirements on secure boot and TPM to lessen them for the new one, because it's not like they're actually, unless you turn on BitLocker, the hard drive encryption software, they really don't use it They use secure boot, but they don't use the TPM a whole lot.
Yeah, I guess this is kind of an arbitrary requirement.
I mean, it's Microsoft, so they're making a decision on this for 10 years in the future when they can say, hey, all of your software has to be signed in order to run it on our computer.
Yeah, because I mean, like, let's be clear, like this kind of hardware validation is not a bad thing, right? Like, I mean, it can be very annoying.
It's problematic from a, hey, who owns my computer standpoint.
Yeah. Yes, sure.
Because it is a box that I don't own and I don't have access to, and I can't really write keys or remove keys because a lot of them are baked into hardware and stuff like that.
Yeah. I guess when hardware is in play, it is a bit fuzzier. You know, like HTTPS has been obviously a huge boon for the internet, for example, like authentication.
Absolutely.
Certification of authority and security has been enormously beneficial on the internet. But I guess when you have a piece of hardware, you know, like there's a different expectation around a physical good that you buy, as if it's like a car or a tractor or something, and you want to just do what the hell you want to do with it.
Well, and
that's a little bit more frustrating. In
a world where there's not market pressure to prevent them from doing this, Microsoft could say, hey, all of your software has to come from the Microsoft store that you run on this computer. Yeah. I mean, that's what they were clearly trying to do with Windows 8, and people just revolted, and also the software sucked and it was bad. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know how recent of a Mac OS you've used day to day, but Apple has gone way harder in that direction than Microsoft ever thought about. Yeah. Like, you can still get around it. You can absolutely still disable all that stuff eventually and run whatever you want on a modern MacBook, but like sometimes depending on what you're trying to run, it can take like tinkering in the terminal to get them to let you run just like a random unsigned binary that you downloaded from somewhere.
Yeah, that's madness. So anyway, if you're affected, if you're on Windows 10, you're worried about this, there's some things to know. Entirely likely that they're going to extend the date at least once. You can, if you have a machine that's newer than 2018, that you bought more recently than 2018, you can check your BIOS. You should update your BIOS. You can check your BIOS to see if you can turn on the options. There's actually a really good Microsoft document that says if you go to the install Windows 11 page and search for and look at like the system requirements, there's a link there that says it shows you how to turn on the TSM and secure boot, TPM and secure boot rather. You can e-waste your computer and buy a new one. I'm sure they're really excited about selling Copilot Plus PCs.
I bet.
Yeah, that's an option.
Yes.
Desktop Linux.
I wrote this.
Pretty good now.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we talked about it recently. Like it's been literally like 2 decades of joking about the year of the Linux desktop.
It's not 2025.
But it's actually kind of not a joke anymore. Not saying that it's going to be like the operating system of the future or something, but it's actually becoming viable. Like we're actually at the point where it's not just a joke to say, hey, you should run Linux on the desktop. It is increasingly becoming like a totally viable option for even people who don't want to spend their life in a shell.
You can play your video games over there now and run your Adobe software, and stuff just kind of works for the most part.
And it's the driver support. It's like the OS installation and the driver support and the out-of-box experience has gotten good enough with a lot of distros and a lot of desktop environments at this point that.
Well, and especially older hardware, right? Yes. So if you're on a machine that's not supported by Windows 11, it's going to be supported by whatever LTM version of Linux you download. If you're getting Ubuntu or Pop OS or one of those, the stuff you'll plug it in, it'll just work even for laptops. Like,
yes. And then there are plenty of distros that are explicitly cater to old hardware that run stuff like XFCE and some of the like really bare bones, like lightweight desktops and stuff like that. So you can revitalize an old machine and get it running quite nicely with a lot of different Linux distros these days. And so if you've got like a 6th or 7th gen Intel machine that you don't want to stop using and you don't want to deal with all this Windows crap, like that's actually a viable option now.
There's also Chrome OS Flex, which is open port of Chrome OS. Basically, it basically turns your old laptop or desktop PC into a Chrome OS machine. So it's basically just a browser-based OS. It's quite capable and it performs really well even on like 4th gen Intel machines.
Is that something that Google themselves are putting out? It looks like.
I don't know about that. I don't know where it comes from.
Huh. Yeah, there's a page right here on support.google.com about like Chrome OS Flex installation guide.
There you go.
So I guess that must be something they're putting out themselves. That's interesting.
I put it on my old MacBook. It's a 13-inch Air from like 2012 or 2013.
I should maybe think about that. I've got a 2011 MacBook Air that is like, I think it's like High Sierra is the most recent Mac OS. Like it's so out of date.
We might have gotten those at the same time, Brad, because those might be the ones we got when we were at Whiskey.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Anyway, I've put like Ubuntu on that thing in the past, and like this was 5 years ago or something, but it was still enough of a pain in the ass that maybe this Chrome OS 4 is a better idea.
This is pretty good. So yeah, there's options, I guess, is what I'm saying. Don't panic. But we wanted to talk about it in case people had questions, and we didn't think it was a whole episode worth.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah. The astronauts probably okay. Boeing less so. AI's got problems.
Yep.
And Windows 10 is going to go away next year.
The AI bubble might be close to bursting.
I don't look. One of the things they did say in this article that kind of bummed me out is the bubbles pop slow now, especially when people have invested this much money. So
fair.
Probably okay for a little bit, but I don't know. We can dream.
Yeah. Anyway, hey, look, 3 podcasts in one.
Yeah, three podcasts in one.
Where else can you get that kind of value?
And if you would like to find out how to get even more value, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that's patreon.com/techpod, where for $5 a month, you can become a supporting listener of the show. That's right. We are a listener supported show, and without you all, we wouldn't be here. So we appreciate you and would love to bring more good folks into the realm where you get access to the monthly patron exclusive episode. We had an idea for a new one. Oh,
we didn't write it down, did we?
No, we did. I'm going to put it here so we remember. It was a rejected third story about Sony not manufacturing Blu-ray recordable discs anymore. And I was cleaning up my garage last weekend and I found a whole big spindle of old recordable media. And I was like, I wonder how much of this is still good. It's been in my garage for the last 10 years. I'm going to just open up a stream and get an external drive and put the discs in and see which ones work and see what's on them.
All right.
So maybe that's a patron episode this month. I don't know.
That sounds fun.
Anything's possible. It could be really boring. It could go either way.
That sounds fun. I'm going to say this also, just so we don't forget about it. Another patron episode idea we had was maybe a how the podcast is made.
Oh yeah.
Kind of thing. Like from soup to nuts. Is that a phrase people
soup
use?
Soup to nuts. I had a guy I worked for at the University of Tennessee who said soup to nuts.
I'm in a bad habit of throwing out idioms and metaphors and so forth that I don't necessarily 100% have a handle on.
Yeah, I would think you'd go nuts to soup because like I don't put a lot of nuts in my soups.
Yeah,
maybe peanuts in like Thai soup sometimes.
Oh, I thought it was describing the course, like the entire arc of a long sit down meal. Like you get soup first, and then you get a salad, and then your entree, and then
a cheese and nut course at the end.
But who gets nuts at the very end of the meal? I don't know.
It feels very much like a country metaphor for me.
Sure.
I don't know. If you know what soup to nuts means, you can post it in the Discord. You get access to that when you're a patron as well. It's full of lovely people, beautiful nerds who talk about interesting stuff pretty much all day long. And like you can learn all sorts of good stuff there. As always, we would like to thank our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, Jordan Lippett, Bunny Fiend, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you.
And I guess that'll do it for us this week.
I can confirm that will do it for us.
This is the end of the show. We will be back next week with another edition of the Tech Pod. Until then, maybe go update some firmware. It's fun and profitable. See you next time. Bye.